Have you ever stopped to think about what the Wild West would be like without the famous saloons? These establishments popped up all over the American frontier, creating scenes that still capture our imagination today. When you hear the word saloon, it's almost impossible not to picture that wooden building on a dusty street, a spot to tie up the horses, and those swinging doors moving back and forth as cowboys walk in, looking for a shot of whiskey. If you enjoy stories like this and want to see more content, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us keep bringing you interesting topics. And to make sure you never miss a video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Imagine walking along little explored trails and at the end of a long, exhausting day, stumbling upon a stopping point where stories are shared and new connections are made. This was the kind of setting where saloons thrived, growing alongside the westward expansion of the United States. In places like Taos and Santa Fe, New Mexico, there were already cantinas with Mexican influences, but the arrival of saloons turned small settlements and trail crossings into lively hubs. Around 1822, the first officially recognized saloon popped up in Brown's Hole, a region where Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah meet. Known as Brown's Saloon, it became a hotspot for fur trappers during the booming fur trade era. Saloons also gained popularity in places where troops were stationed, like Bent's Fort in Colorado in the late 1820s. Over time, saloons spread along the trails traveled by cowboys, especially in towns like Dodge City, Kansas. Meanwhile, miners trekked through rough terrain and deep canyons in search of precious metals, stopping by these saloons to rest and trade news about their latest discoveries. Can you imagine walking into a tiny village with just one place to grab a drink, only to see that same spot packed with saloons a few years later? That's exactly what happened in Santa Barbara, California, when gold was discovered there in 1848. At first, there was just one small cantina, but before long, the town had over 30 saloons scattered all over, buzzing with people and stories that intertwined with every drink poured. This kind of boom wasn't unique to California. By 1883, the town of Livingston, Montana, had only about 3,200 residents, but it boasted 33 saloons catering to both locals and outsiders. These places weren't just bars. They were meeting points of different cultures, business hubs, and the backdrop for some of the Wild West's most interesting moments. When it came to drinking, the tradition was rough. Most folks ordered straight rye or bourbon, no mixers, no fuss, and downed it in one gulp. Anyone who took their time or asked for something fancier was bound to get some teasing, unless they already had a reputation as someone you didn't want to mess with. Strangers, especially foreigners who hesitated too much, might even find themselves forced to knock back a full glass of strong liquor, with the barrel of a revolver pointed at them. Supposedly it was for their own good. Imagine walking into a saloon in the Wild West. You step up to the bar and quickly realize that the beer they're serving is far from ice cold. Back then, it was poured into your mug at a temperature between 55 degrees Fahrenheit and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, way warmer than what we're used to today. There was a bit of foam, but nothing too thick, and the usual practice was to drink fast before the carbonation disappeared. Things started to change in the 1880s when artificial refrigeration and pasteurization came along, thanks to Adolphus Busch. These innovations allowed breweries to distribute their brands nationwide, with Budweiser standing out from the rest. Up until then, nobody really expected their beer to be cold. It followed European traditions where beer was enjoyed at room temperature. Meanwhile, almost every saloon in a mining town or prairie settlement had a poker table. It was where prospectors, lawmen, cowboys, railroad workers, soldiers, and even outlaws gathered, hoping luck was on their side. The room was filled with the thrill of high-stakes bets and the sound of poker chips sliding across the table, all wrapped up in the lively, rowdy atmosphere of an Old West saloon. In the gambling houses of the Old West, faro was the undisputed favorite. Right behind it were brag, three-card monte, and a handful of dice games like high-low, chuck-a-luck, and grand hazard. Now picture this scene in the rough-and-tumble mining camps of Deadwood, Leadville, and Tombstone. These places were magnets for fortune seekers chasing gold and silver, and not everyone walked away from the tables a winner. Tensions ran high, and sooner or later someone would reach for their revolver. Men like Doc Holliday and Wild Bill Hickok quickly learned that knowing how to gamble and knowing how to draw had to go hand in hand. The result? A silent code among gamblers. If you wanted to stay alive, you had to be quick, both with your cards and your trigger finger. If luck ran out, there was only one rule left: shoot first, ask questions later. Have you ever stopped to think about how many different types of saloons existed back in the Old West? There were card game saloons, places that served meals, spots with pool tables, dance halls, and even bowling alleys. And of course, there were plenty of bars where the drinks flowed without limits. These establishments had some pretty interesting names like First Chance Saloon in Miles City, Montana, Bull's Head in Abilene, Kansas, and Holy Moses in Creede, Colorado. In the busier towns, many saloons never even closed. They stayed open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One detail that always sparks curiosity is the famous swinging doors. They did exist in some saloons, but they weren't as common as Hollywood made them seem. Still, in the movies, it's hard to resist the classic scene of the hero bursting through the doors or a group of outlaws getting thrown straight into the street. It was a simple but effective way to highlight the action and create iconic moments. Now, picture the daily life of someone who spent hours at the bar. The most dedicated regulars would lean on the counter so much that they actually developed calluses on their elbows from all the drinking and talking. Little details like that give us a glimpse into the non-stop high-energy atmosphere that defined the saloon era, making these places a huge part of Old West culture and legend. In the Old West, hardly anyone drank alone. Saloons brought together all kinds of people: miners, gamblers, workers, and outlaws. The fun had no set ending, and this rowdy social atmosphere was what kept the doors open day and night. But not everyone was welcomed with open arms. Native Americans were banned from entering, and black men were only let in if they had a reputation as skilled gamblers or feared criminals. As for the Chinese, just showing up could put their life in danger. Even soldiers weren't exactly welcome. Many folks in these parts were adventurers, war deserters, or people who didn't fit into the strict rules of military life. For them, having armed authorities around was bad news. In this world, the saloon was more than just a place to drink. It was a stage for meetings, confrontations, and quick alliances, where respect and suspicion went hand in hand with every full glass. At the height of the rumors, many soldiers were blamed for spreading diseases among the workers of the so-called parlor houses. Meanwhile, respectable women were kept out of saloons. Only saloon girls or ladies of questionable reputation were allowed inside. This division lasted until World War I, when social norms finally began to shift. Over time, some of these women turned against the very establishments that had excluded them. They threw their support behind the temperance movement, leading campaigns to shut down saloons across different regions. It's worth noting that in many early settlements, the saloon was often one of the first buildings to go up. It wasn't just a place for drinking and entertainment. It also served as a gathering spot for meetings and community events. In some towns, saloons even doubled as makeshift courthouses, like in the case of Judge Roy Bean, who famously handed down verdicts from behind his bar while pouring drinks. In Hays City, Kansas, something unusual caught people's attention. The first religious services in town were actually held inside the Tommy Drum Saloon. This goes to show just how versatile Old West saloons could be. Besides selling booze and hosting card games, many ended up being used for unexpected activities, including church gatherings. Some of the most famous figures in Western history left their mark on these establishments. Ben Daniels, Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, Ben Thompson, Doc Holliday, and many others either worked in saloons or even owned a few. These places were natural meeting points for people in town, but they were also hotspots for trouble, where conflicts could turn deadly in an instant. To sum up the rough and rowdy nature of these saloons, Bob Younger once said in 1876, "We are rough men and used to rough ways." And that mentality played out in bar fights and even murders. One of the most infamous was the killing of Wild Bill Hickok, who was shot by Jack McCall during a poker game at Saloon Number 10 in Deadwood, South Dakota. Another notorious incident happened on August 19, 1895, when John Wesley Hardin was shot in the back inside a saloon in El Paso, Texas. During wild nights, saloons became the stage for all kinds of unexpected events. Behind the bars and poker tables, stories unfolded, some filled with violence, others with laughter and good times. Sometimes things ended in a gunfight in the street or even a lynching, as vigilante groups took justice into their own hands. Inside these saloons, saloon girls had a clear role: to bring life to the night for the lonely men who passed through. Their job wasn't just about stereotypes. They sang, danced, talked, and sometimes flirted or made people laugh. It wasn't always about leading to anything more. Often the goal was simply to keep the mood lively, making sure customers stayed longer and spent more. However, not every saloon operated the same way. In more respectable spots, like the north side of Front Street in Dodge City, things were much stricter. No guns were allowed. Saloon girls weren't part of the scene, and gambling was off limits. Instead, people came for music, billiards, and drinks, creating a more controlled and relaxed atmosphere, a far cry from the chaos that ruled in some of the rougher saloons. In 1849, during the California Gold Rush, Boomtown saw the rise of dance halls, places that became social hubs filled with stories and excitement. Dancing was the main attraction, though gambling was often part of the experience too. To join in, guests had to buy a ticket, which cost anywhere from 80 cents to $1. But the dance offered more than just entertainment. The profits were split between the dancer and the saloon owner. And after the dance, the night usually continued at the bar, where the dancer also earned a commission on the drinks sold. This setup turned each dance into a ritual that blended fun, business, and the one-of-a-kind atmosphere of the Old West. Even today, the spirit of saloons lives on in subtle ways. These establishments still serve as gathering places, whether for business people making deals or folks just looking to escape their daily worries. They carry on the essence of a time when every night brought new opportunities and unexpected encounters. If this story piqued your curiosity, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below to follow more stories exploring the secrets and legendary meetings of the past. Thanks for watching.